Namaskaram. I'm Vishwanathan Iyer, Professor of Accounting, Dean Academics at the TFI Management Institute located at Manipal, Udupi district in Karnataka. Udupi is a Vaishnav temple town. Few of you may have come to this place. We have a beautiful Krishna Mat. Now, I'm talking about some lessons from Bhagavad Gita for today's session. Now, you see, Bhagavad Gita is a very interesting treatise. I say that because there is something for everyone. Now, whether you are a beginner, whether you are an advanced seeker, right, you have some esoteric expectations, you are looking for some solutions to bhautik problems, or you are having deep adhyatmic outlook into matters, right, you will always find something. Another interesting thing is, if you look at it from the lens of a Dvaiti, a Visishta Dvaiti, or an Advaiti, right, you can always interpret the shloka, and there is always fantastic meaning that comes out of these verses. So, I will today speak on a topic that resonates with both B school students as well as people at large. I told I'm a professor at a business school here. So, this is an aspect of self-management that we generally infer from personality traits. In psychology literature, trait theory is an approach to study of human personality. Now, I'll give you a brief outline, a couple of minutes on this. Traits are the habitual patterns of behavior, thought and action. There are many frameworks to study traits. Now, there is a very popular framework called as the OCEAN, Big Five personality trait. So, OCEAN, it stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness and neuroticism. Neuroticism is an inverse scale. Now, each of this have a very specific meaning in the management literature. Now, of all this, I am looking at the second one, the C, conscientiousness, or some people pronounce it as conscientiousness. Right, so whichever way you pronounce it. Now, conscientiousness implies some amount of self-discipline, orderliness, or I can say dutifulness. The person displays planned behavior and is generally dependable. Now, these are, so if a person is rated high on this conscientiousness scale, these are some of the things that you expect from that person. So, what is, the interesting thing is, generally, we expect, whether you are a B school student, a businessman, a manager, anyone for that matter, right? We expect people to have high level of conscientiousness score. Why that is the case? Because almost everyone wants to be systematic, disciplined. If we have thought of something, we have planned something, we would want to go ahead and execute it. That's what we expect, right? But you will be surprised to know that large majority of people have very low, what we call as the C scores, right? Take examples of our own lives. We decide that we will get up every day in the morning and do exercise. Now remember, we know that doing exercise is good. It is essential, critical, yet very few people have the discipline to get up and do it, right? We may have lots of plans about diets, not to eat this, maybe only eat certain things on certain days, but we still end up cheating. Now, this is people at large. If I talk of my students, I see them, when it comes to studies or their own assignments, submissions, examinations, you expect them to do it regularly. Invariably, you will find that they do it, when everything gets piled up, and they do it towards the end of it. So, the question that I am asking is this a modern problem that we find in today's generation? Or is this something that it existed during the Mahabharata time as well? There were many Maharathis, right? So here I will present to you comparison of Duryodhan and Arjuna, right? So I will quote from the respective places to tell you how they were doing on this count. So Duryodhan says, Janami dharmam nachame pravritti, janami adharmam nachame nivritti, kenapi devena hridistitena, yata niyoktosmi tatha karomi. Now, it's a very interesting line. This is from the Prapanna Gita or Pandav Gita, verse, the 57th shloka. It means Duryodhana says, I know what is dharma, yet I cannot get myself to follow it. Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. I mean, I know it and still I am not able to do it. Janami adharmam. I know what is adharmam. Nachame nivritti. And still I cannot recluse myself out of it. It is as if, kenapi devena hristitena. Devena here is a representation of some kind of power inside me. Right? So, there is some power, something that dwells inside me, which makes me do it. Right? So, in other words, he is saying I am helpless. It's not that I don't know. Right? That what I am doing is other. But that's how it is. That's how I function. Now compare this with what Arjuna says in chapter 3, verse 36 of Bhagavad Gita. He says, Atakkena prayaktoyam papam charati purushaha. Right? And most important word, Anichchannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. This Anichha, the word we still use in Hindi today, it comes from Sanskrit. Anichchannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. That is, I know that it is papam, yet even without me wanting it, unwillingly, I end up doing it. Hey Varshnaya, that is, he is referring to Krishna, belonging to the Vrishni clan. That is, Prabhu, even without me wanting to do it, I end up doing it. Now you see the difference between the tonality. Now if I give you a modern parlance from Bollywood, you remember the line, मैं ऐसा क्यों हूँ? There is a popular song, I guess from the movie Dil Chahta Hai, right? मैं ऐसा क्यों हूँ? There was also another movie which had a title, मैं ऐसा ही हूँ, right? Now you see the difference. So Duryodhana says, मैं ऐसा ही हूँ, whereas Arjun says, मैं ऐसा क्यों हूँ? What is that I can do to probably get out of this problem? Now, because I started my talk from talking about the big 5 traits, I went back to which comes from the psychology literature. So I went back and I also looked at some of the questions posed in the psychology literature in the recent times, in the 20th century, in the recent years. What kind of, so there is a branch of psychology called as positive psychology, which actually looks at the positive aspects of human experience that make life worth living. So this is a branch within the overall literature of psychology. Now there are few interesting things that I came across. One is all students, the students of psychology and in organizational behavior, people do discuss this and come across this. There is a famous Walter Mischel marshmallow experiment. I mean, it talks about the power of delayed gratification. Now what is this power of delayed gratification? He did a very interesting experiment. He got hold of all children, about 90 of them, the professor of Stanford, so in the Stanford residential area, the children of faculty members and others, about 90 of them, all between age 4 to 5, small kids. And he played one at a time, okay, he played some small games with them, and then such that, the kids win. And at the end of it, he says, oh wow, now that you have won, let me give you as a gift a marshmallow. Children love marshmallow. The American kids generally love marshmallows, right? Now, here is a deal. He gives him a marshmallow and he says, you are free to eat it now. However, I'm going to go out. I have some work. I'll come back after probably 15-20 minutes. He doesn't say exactly how much, but he says it will take some time. But when I come back, and if you haven't still eaten it, I will give you one more marshmallow, right? So now you've given a deal to the child. If you are willing to hold on, you will get 2. But if you are seeking instant gratification, well, you had your marshmallow and when I come back, goodbye, that's it. So there was a camera which was recording the behavior of children, all these kids, 90 kids. He came back, some of them ate, some of them couldn't control, some of them waited. He gave them the additional one, thanked them and let them go. Now that's not the thing that I'm talking about. Now over the next 30 to 40 years, he tracked these children. Now these were 4 to 5. Now when they were another 14 years later, when they were about 18 years of age, when they had given their SAT exam, he went back, he interviewed them, he interviewed their friends, their parents, and there was some very interesting things that he found. And this is after 14 years and later after 20 years. What he found, the kids at the age of 4 and 5 who were able to resist their temptation, they ended up having high SAT scores, lower levels of substance abuse, lower likelihood of obesity, better response to stress, generally good human beings. I mean, on a range of measures. Let me not make sweeping statements. But the sum and substance of the argument is that he found that these children generally came out as better individuals than the others. Now, this experiment was replicated by many others. There are lots of studies. Some studies, added more layers to it. Some studies negated some of the results. On an academic level, if you are doing a PhD, that's a matter of detail. But from the perspective of inferring the lessons learned from this, what we find is people who are able to hold on to their sense of seeking gratification, they generally do well in life, is what comes across from the study. Now, this in the same psychology literature, there are other places as well where you will find, for example, Hofstede's cultural dimension. So there are many dimensions of culture that Hofstede talks about, national culture, organization, specifically national culture. So power distance, uncertainty avoidance. Amongst all this, there is an interesting thing he says. He says an important part of understanding a culture is looking at their long-term versus short-term orientation. Are they looking at things from a very short-term perspective or long-term perspective? So, for example, you can think of Japan as a nation. I mean, generally, of course, there are exceptions to people, but as a culture, as a national culture, you will find Japan is very forward-looking. They don't look at things with immediate gratification in mind. Whereas, let me pick up some random country. Let's say Morocco. If there are people from Morocco watching this video, please don't come and beat me up. Right? I'm just picking it up as an example. So people generally have short-term orientation. Later, in the last few years, Hofstede has added another dimension to this, indulgence versus restraint. So this again goes back to the same question that I said. So even in the modern literature, psychology literature, in the positive psychology, organizational behavior, people are studying this, right? So this entire question is being looked at from very different lens. Now I take you back to Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna answers Arjuna's question. So there are two verses that I am going to quote. Chapter 3. The chapter 3 is positioned in Karma Yoga. Verse 33 and 34. These are the two verses that I am using for this discussion. Now, Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha prakriter janavanapi. So this is from 33. Prakriti yanti bhutani nigraham kim karishyati. So, Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha. Cheshta means action, right? Swasyaha, my own action, my own volition I am acting. Prakriter jnanavanapi. Now, it is governed by my own prakriti. So, Krishna says, even for a wise, jnanavanapi, even for a wise, learned person, his actions are governed by his nature. And this is not just true for individuals. He says, Prakritim yanti bhutani, even in the bhuta, all living beings, for example, you will find, you don't have to teach a dog to be loyal. This is something inherent in them, right? This is their nature. You don't have to teach an ant to be industrious. An ant picks up food, even if the ant is hungry. I mean, there are studies, if you ask me personally, I don't know, but I have referred to the studies. It says that even when an ant is hungry, it picks up food and it walks miles. Miles may be small distance for us, but for an ant, if you think of it as equivalent ant mile, it walks long distance, carries the food and then takes it to its collective. But this is its nature, its own prakriti. Right? So, Krishna here says, now this is a very interesting thing. So, what Krishna says is that even wise people act according to their nature. Right? And what will one gain by repressing it? Nigraham kim karishyati. Right? Now, what is the interesting lesson here? This prakriti that we see of a person, of a creature, or this prakriti acts at a subconscious level. This prakriti is influenced by our samskaras and prarabdha karma. What is this samskara? Our own tendencies, impressions that we have gained over a period of time. Prarabdha karma is, if you believe in the idea of past life, then it comes over from the past life, even if you don't believe in past life. Our own, from childhood, from the time that we have had sense, till whatever age that we are in right now, there are many things that we have done, and each of those karma have left an impression in our mind. So there is karma. Okay, now it's important to understand when Bhagavad Gita says karma Karma is not necessarily getting up, acting, eating, drinking, sleeping. No, those are physical actions. Karma in a broader sense is interpreted as knowing, doing, being, all three states. If I think about someone and say, what an idiot he is, okay, now I have already done a karma. I have said something apriya about someone, so that I have already done a karma. It is not that I have to tell the person on his face. So even a thought, when it enters my head, I have already performed a karma, right? So I'm looking at it from that logic. So Krishna says that your prakriti is there, and then there are karmas, right? And there is no point in repressing, because your karma comes out of your own prakriti. Fine. So in modern parlance, we say we are all creatures of habit. Of course, it's a very it's slightly different context, but then that gives you the idea. Now the immediate next verse, very interesting verse. In fact, the most important verse for the purpose of this discussion. Indriyasya indriyasyarthe raga dvesho vyavasthito. Now, indriya, our sense organs. Indriyasyarthe, that is the objects of our sense organ. Raga dvesho vyavasthito. Raga is the attachment and dvesha is the aversion. So essentially what it means is that our senses naturally experience attachment and aversion to the sense objects. And then Krishna goes on to say, Tayorna vashama gacheto rasya paripantino, which means, don't be controlled by them. So the point here is that when we do some action, okay, we do the action through our jnanendriya, karmendriya, through our indriya, and these indriya get attached to the objects. For example, I am looking something beautiful, so that beauty, thing of beauty is the object. I am eating something tasty, that food is the object. I am smelling something wonderful, aroma, right? So that source of smell. So there is an object. My sense is getting attached to that object. Does that happen all the time? Now think of it. It is a thought experiment. Whatever may be your age, over, let's say you're 30, 40, 50 years of age, over your lifetime, you would have done millions and millions of things. For example, crossing the road. At least a million times you would have crossed the road, whatever road. It could be a gully, it could be a highway, whatever. I'm just taking some random act. Drinking water. You would have drank water, assuming you drink water 3 times a day or 4 times a day. I don't drink that as much. People who drink, right? And multiply by the number of days that you have been alive. Millions of times, right? Point here is, are you attached to those actions? You may not even remember how many times you have crossed the road since your birth, or how many times you drank water. But you may remember a certain rasagulla, right? You may remember a certain vada pav. You may remember a certain delicacy, right? You may remember a certain flower. So now you see, it is not that we are not capable of performing our action without attachment or aversion. It is possible, but there are occasions where our senses do get attached, right? So there is either an attachment or there is an aversion. Now, so therefore, what is the purport of this particular verse is that, see, we all have to act. I mean, we are human beings. Our actions can only be done through our sense organs. But once we act through the sense organ, is there a way we can detach ourselves? Right? So now I am going to combine the verse 33 and verse 34 and see what is the connection. Now recall, Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha prakriter jnanavanapi. This is from the verse 33, which means your cheshta, action, is a function of prakriti. Prakriti itself is a function of your samskara or prarabdha karma, which means your own nature, your impressions that you have acquired over a period of time, your own karma, past life, current life, right? Now this is action, and so there is vritti and there is samskara. Now between the two, there is raga dvesha. So indriyasya indriyasyarthe raga dvesho vyavasthita. So the sense organs are doing the job, but the sense organs, depending upon raga or dvesha, get attached to the sense object. Now it is here Krishna indicates that don't be slave to this. So it is this raga and dvesha. If you can take a pause, aware, be aware that's where you can possibly control. You cannot directly control the outcome, but you can become more aware. Now it is this awareness which is the foundation to Nishkama Karma and the entire Karma Yoga in general. At this stage, I will also bring in a couple of verses from Katha Upanishad. Now, Katha Upanishad is a very interesting Upanishad. It is a conversation between Yama and Nachiketa, right? So, in the Katha Upanishad, in one of the conversation, Yama talks about the path of self-knowledge. He calls this the path of yoga. This is when there is stillness of senses and concentration of mind. Now, that's what he calls as yoga. Tam yogamiti manyante sthiramindriya dharanam. Sthiramindriya dharanam. So, it is only when you are able to still your thoughts and buddhi, that's your intellect, does not waver, that's when you can achieve the highest path. Now, similarly, when you look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, so Yoga Sutra also talks about this Evam Vritti Samskara Chakra, that is the connection between the Vritti and the Samskara, that is action and your own past Samskara. Samskara is coming out of past action, Prarabdha Karma, so on and so forth. So the Yoga Sutra goes into much greater detail, that is how you can break this cycle of Vritti and Samskara. So it proposes Ashtanga Yoga. Many of you may be aware of the Ashtanga Yoga. So the first 4 parts are Yama, Niyama, Asana and Pranayama. So Asana and Pranayama, I am sure quite a few of you would be practicing. The last 3, this is the first 4. The last 3 is Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. That's the mental trait. Now between the first 4, which is physical, and the last 3, which is mental, there is a state called as Pratyahara. If you do the Sandhi Vichhed, that is Prati Ahara, that is you are withdrawing. Right? Now that's the key. So yoga talks about that if you want to meditate, you want to achieve the state of Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, once you have corrected for postures and pranayama, you need to withdraw yourself, right? It is this which is also linked from the verse 34 of Bhagavad Gita, whereas you pause, you reflect, you become aware of the Raga Dvesha, right? Now, is it possible in real life? I mean, or is it that I can only talk about it in Bhagavad Gita? Now, take some examples from your own life. A large majority of you would have probably learned how to drive, right? So, there must have been a state, I'm talking of, let's say, driving a car. So, there must have been a state where you were not aware of how to drive a car. And then you would have reached a stage where you can effortlessly drive a car. Now, take some moment. Reflect on that how did you move from 0 to 1, that is a state where you didn't know how to drive, to a state where you now drive effortlessly. Now within this large picture there must have been a lot of intermittent milestones. Some of these must have been physical milestones, that is I am able to start the car. I mean, people who have learnt will know that even the beginner, even starting a car, giving ignition and releasing that clutch is a Herculean task in itself, and many a times you will find that the car stops, right? So starting the car itself must have been achievement in those early days. And then there are certain non-physical milestones, that I am able to effortlessly take a turn without thinking about it. And so there are you, if you go back and reflect yourself, you will realize that many of these would have come gradually, many of these would have come as an outcome of certain specific event. You know, on an uphill slope, your vehicle goes and stops, and there is a vehicle ahead of you, there is a vehicle behind you. Now if you accelerate too much, you will go and hit the person ahead of you. If you let the clutch, you will go back. I mean, it is those experiences which probably would have taught you a lot of things. Now reflect on this. So there must have been a lot of things that you have practiced over a period of time, been extremely conscious and aware. Now if you look at a beginner who is driving car, you will find that his eyes are bulged out, right? And the person is trying to block out every other sound, so that he is able to focus all his karmendriya into the act that he is performing, right? I mean, these are some of the things that we do instinctively when we are doing that. Now, what you did at that point in time, can it become a effortless course of life? The answer is yes. The path of yoga helps you do this effortlessly throughout the life, not just when it comes to driving a car. So I pause, I take a stock of what we just discussed. So this idea that your own past prarabdha karma, right? Your own nature leads to action, and between this your own nature and the action is the state of raga dvesha. And if you can become aware of this state of raga and dvesha, you will be able to control in due course of time, right? Now what it means is, it is this which will help you, and this can be harnessed, practiced through yoga vidya. And if you do that, you will become more responsible, dependable. You will be able to achieve the tasks that is expected out of you. You remember I told at the beginning, conscientiousness, one of the big 5 traits. Now this is at a bhautik level. At an adhyatmic level, of course, this lays the foundation to karma yoga. If you want to understand karma yoga and subsequently jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, or even higher level, you want to achieve a state of sthira chitta. This is a prerequisite to that. It takes you one step closer to this idea. So I would leave you with a thought. Okay, this is I'm quoting Adi Shankara from the Nirvana Shtakam, right? The first few lines: Mano buddhi ahankara chittani naham, na cha shrotra jivhe, na cha grana netre, na cha vyoma bhumir, na tejo na vayu, chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. What Adi Shankara says is that I am neither the mind, nor the intellect, nor the ego, nor the organs, whether it is eyes, ears, no, neither the sky, nor the earth, nor the fire. I am pure consciousness. Now, if you want to reach that stage of pure consciousness, it starts, the first step is what I said today, verse 34, becoming aware of this raga dvesha. You become aware, you gradually understand the path of nishkama karma, and gradually you will understand, you'll go towards this Chidananda Rupa. I mean, of course, he stops by, he says Shivoham, Shivoham. Now, if you don't like Shivoham, Shivoham, you can say Gopalam, Gopalam, right? So that, it doesn't matter. It's a state of pure blissful consciousness. So with that thought, namaskar.